There we go. Yeah, we got more people coming in. So, well, I will go ahead and get started. Thank you again so much for joining me on this somewhat fall evening. I'm gonna move this over here. For those of you that don't know me or maybe haven't actually officially met me, my name is Amanda. I am one of the pre-med academic advisors on campus. And I am here to talk to you a little bit about MCAT prep. And so before I get started, I want to give my little disclaimer that this is not an MCAT prep workshop, meaning that I'm not going to go over any specific content today, right? The purpose of this workshop is to get those of you that are thinking about potentially testing sometime next semester to start preparing and thinking about all of the things that go into a nice, solid MCAT prep study period. And I do talk about a lot of things that go into that and some considerations that students don't think about up front as they're starting to embark in this journey of MCAT prep. Wayne State does not offer an official MCAT prep course. So if you were looking for it and can't find it, that's why. Anytime one of the major companies, Kaplan, Princeton Review, Blueprint, Altuis, whoever they are, is offering a deal specifically to our students, you will see us blast that out either via email or in the newsletter. Sometimes we will share that stuff on Instagram too. So keep your eyes peeled for that if that is something that you're kind of thinking you want to incorporate into your study plan after you attend this workshop. I had huge technology issues starting last Friday, and I'm waiting for my mouse and my keyboard to come in. So if you could see my setup right now, you would think I'm kind of crazy. Okay, so what am I going to be talking to you about today? I want to make sure that we take a little bit of time to understand why medical schools require the MCAT and what you should kind of expect, and then discuss the things that you want to think about when you're deciding when you're going to take this test. Timing seems to be kind of one of those forefronted issues that students want to talk about first, and there are some things that you really need to consider in, when you alongside timing of the MCAT as you're making that decision. I'll highlight some do's and don'ts in terms of studying and the test in general, and then we'll dive into kind of a study plan. What are the elements? So we'll talk about books, we'll talk about software, we'll talk about courses, so that you can make some smart decisions based on you as an individual and what works for you. And then I will emphasize why a personal plan is important based on research and anecdotal evidence from students that I've worked with throughout the almost 8 years that I've been doing this. When you leave here, my hope is that you'll have a good idea about how to take the next steps towards studying for this exam. Just out of curiosity, whether you drop it in the chat or you unmute yourself, how many of you are actually planning on taking this exam in the spring or winter semester? So sometime between the months of January and let's say June of 2024. How many of you are planning on taking this exam then? Okay. So you're looking at maybe some early May dates, Evan. Who else? April. Okay. Oh, hey, Mohammed, how are you? When else is everybody planning on taking this? And it's okay if you're not sure yet. I just kind of wanted to get a sense of where we're at. I'm good, thanks. Okay. All right. We'll move on. You can think about that. If you want to tell me, cool. If not, that's okay too. All right, so let's talk about the MCAT. So MCAT simply stands for Medical College Admissions Test. And really, it's used for two reasons by medical schools. One, it's an opportunity for you as an applicant to demonstrate that you have the ability to apply scientific concepts in a testing setting, right? In a test setting, and that you can perform on a standardized exam, because many of the exams that you take while in medical school that lead towards residency applications or board certification are also going to be standardized. So medical schools want to make sure that they're choosing those applicants that are going to have be successful in those exams and not involve a lot of remediation while in medical school. The second thing that it does is it allows medical schools to standardize the applicants. This is the only standardization in the primary application. Everybody takes the same MCAT no matter where they live in the United States. It might not be the exact same version with the same order of questions, but the exam is standardized and offered by the AAMC. So everybody's taking basically the same version of it. So when medical schools are looking at scores across the board, they know that and can allow them to compare applicants in a bit of side by side way. So the test has 4 different sections. And when you total the time in to time out, check into the testing center, getting yourself acclimated to where you're going to be putting your stuff in storage, where you're coming for breaks, going through the process of getting yourself organized at your computer seat, right? It's about 8.5 and 9 hours. Once the actual test starts, you'll start with the first section, which is going to cover all of the chemistry and all of the physics content that you've learned. So we're talking about your Gen Chem 1, your Gen Chem 2, your Orgo 1, and your Orgo 2 class in terms of chemistry. And then we're talking about Physics 1 and Physics 2. One of the really popular rumors I hear as a pre-med advisor is, there's never a lot of physics on this test. And that is absolutely a false rumor. The amount of physics that a student may see can vary from administration to administration. So our office firmly believes that students should really be through both physics sections, 1 and 2, prior to sitting for this exam. After the Chem Phys section, you take a small break and you move into CARS, which is the short version of critical analysis and reasoning. In this section, you can expect to read passages and then have to answer multiple choice questions in relation to that passage. You're going to be asked to reason beyond what the meaning of the text is. You're going to be asked to draw conclusions from the text. The type of content in those passages is anything but science. So the other 3 sections of the exam are going to be a little bit more scientific based. You're going to be looking at more social science content, potentially public health, public policy, sociology, maybe some economic kind of policy passages. There might even be some data in there for you to kind of look at and answer questions about. For this reason, we talk to students about trying to build some diversity in the types of classes that they're taking each semester. We have students who love to come in and major in bio and minor in chem, because there's so much crossover between that major and minor combination, between what you have to take to be prepared for the MCAT and be eligible to apply to medical school. But that really does you a disservice, especially when you come in with almost all of your general education courses satisfied. So getting in some of those classes that are going to require you to do some reading, some pretty heavy reading in the social sciences and in the humanities, is actually very beneficial to you for the CARS section of the exam. Then you take a break to eat lunch. And then the third section is the biology and biochemistry section. So you're looking at basic bio here from those early bio classes that you took, that cell bio class that you likely took, that human physiology class. You can see physiology in this section, and then biochemistry can make up to 30% of this section. So again, we see a lot of students who will take the exam without taking that biochem class that come back to our office and know that they need to retake because of the bio section subscore that they've earned. And then you take a break, and the last section covers the psych and social content that we talk about when we talk about why an intro course in each of those areas. The AAMC does publish a content outline, and it was recently updated for the 2024 year. So I'm going to drop a link in the chat for that so that you can pull it up and kind of bookmark it. It's pretty lengthy and specific in terms of breakdown of content topics within the content sections. I am not a scientist. I'm a historian by trade, my undergrad degree. So some of these concepts are a little foreign to me, so I'm not going to go into detail about them, but I think it would be helpful for you to have that as you're thinking about going into this and using it to somewhat assess kind of like where you think longer areas of review might be, especially maybe for some of you that came in with AP credit in some or all of the basic bios, or even in Gen Chem 1 and or Gen Chem 2. Scores take 30 to 35 days to be released. So if you test on like an April 1, you're likely not going to see that score till like a May 1, May 2, maybe an April 30, right? And they'll be sent to you via email. Your score report is going to include both your overall score, right, which is going to range somewhere between 472 and 528, and then as well as your sub-score reports. So you'll get 4 sub-scores, 1 for each of the sections. Oops, I just hit my mouse and it took me to my next slide and I wasn't done talking about. Oh my gosh, you guys, I'm sorry. Hold on. Here we go. We'll just go here. The mouse is all over the place. Oh my gosh. You want to have a great overall score, right? And that's what most people focus on when they come in and talk about what's a good score for the MCAT, right? We always talk to students about aiming for that 75th percentile score, which right now is about a 512, 513, I believe. But you also want to make sure that you're aiming for very even subscores. You don't want it to look like you're really strong in 3 areas and not strong in 1 area, because medical schools are looking for applicants that are strong across the board in all of those sections, right? Your score report does show every attempt. So sometimes we'll get questions about, well, if I retake it, right, my first score will go away. And that's not the case. Just like with the retakes in the classes on your application, they don't go away. Whether or not a medical school will subscore or consider all of the scores is very individualized by school. I've definitely heard of some medical schools looking at the subsection areas in multiple attempts and considering the highest in each area. And I've also heard about schools that look at whatever the most recent attempt is. So sometimes schools share that, sometimes they don't. That's not necessarily knowledge that we have memorized as advisors. But as we bring some of these individual medical schools onto campus, if you're coming to their presentations, I think it's an absolutely appropriate question for you to ask as a potential applicant. In terms of cost, it is $340 this year, registering in the 2024 year, plus any fees that you incur, from scheduling and rescheduling and canceling. So if you schedule on a certain day and as that day is approaching, you're deciding that you're not ready to sit for that exam and you need to reschedule, there will be a fee associated with that rescheduling. And there's you can only reschedule up to a certain number of days before the exam. So you really do need to be prepared and in tune with what you're doing during that preparation period, so that you're not wasting money on rescheduling so often. You have the ability to, I don't know if you're eligible or not, to apply for the fee assistance program. And I'm going to drop a link in the chat for that as well. So the fee assistance program reduces the cost to $140. It also includes other resources. So if you know that you're a good candidate for that program, the fee assistance program, apply 9 months before you plan on taking the MCAT, so you can take advantage of all of the resources that comes with the Fee Assistance Program Award. It includes a lot of the resources that you'll also see in the MCAT hub hosted by the AAMC. The Fee Assistance Program is good for up to 2 years when you apply for it in the first year of that year. And you can reapply if it runs out. I don't know what the likelihood is of you getting the Fee Assistance Program again, but there is the ability to reapply. Okay, let's talk a little bit about when you should take this exam. So despite popular belief, right, a lot of students come in with this idea in their head that there's a set time that you have to take this exam. And that's not necessarily the case. You should actually be looking at a few different things as you make that decision. One of the things is your coursework, right? Are you almost done with your coursework? And by that, we mean the minimum of the 5 bios that we talk about, the 4 semesters of chemistry, the 2 semesters of physics, the intro to psych and soc, right? If you're an Orgo 1, you should not be registering to take this exam to see how it goes, because you don't get to say to a medical school when that score comes on your score report, I just wanted to see how it went. I spent the $340, right? So you really should be towards the end of that coursework. It is very common for Wayne State students to be taking 1 class, and quite honestly, it's usually biochem, at the same time that they're studying for this exam. It is doable, and it's done quite often, like I said. Something else that you'll want to think about is how much time you need to prepare. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this in general in a minute. Or a little bit more about this in depth in a minute. You want to consider the test schedule, right? Tests are only offered on certain days of the year. It's not like the DAT where you can just register and go to the testing center and take it. So you do have to be a little bit strategic, right? When I'm talking to students who are like pretty far out, we talk about targets. So we might say like 2nd week of May or early May, but the closer you get, you do need to set in on a date, especially because testing centers fill up, right? I've had several students who have waited too long to schedule their exam because they're kind of seeing how they're doing in their preparation. And when they go to register for the closest testing center, it's full. I've had students have to drive to Cincinnati, Ohio to take this exam on the date that they were ready because they weren't really kind of paying attention to all of the pieces of preparing for this exam. And then the score release date, right? It's our belief, and when I say our, I mean the pre-med and health science centers, it's our application philosophy that you should know what your score is before you apply. And that's so that you can make really smart decisions about where to apply to, right? If you apply to schools that have, average scores of 520 and earn a 500, you may not have chosen to apply to that school had you known, right? So we can talk in individual settings about strategies around that, but knowing the score release date is also helpful in picking a date so that you can know that the score is coming before you're going to be ready to hit submit on that application, right? Should planning a retake for the exam come into my date selection? I'd say no, absolutely not, because you should really only be planning to take this once. You should be sitting down and coming up with a strategy that's going to allow you to be as successful as possible and take it the one and only time that you're taking it, right? Sometimes things happen and scores don't work out the way that maybe they were in practice tests, or the test day is really bad, maybe you get sick or something like that. When that happens, we're usually talking to students about pushing their application year back. The chances of someone taking a test in April, let's say April 2nd, getting their score back on, let's say May 11th, and then taking the test again on May 24th, and having a significant amount of growth in their score, which is what medical schools are going to want to see if you're taking it more than once, is very minimal. So we want to talk to students about taking the time that they need to develop a new study plan that's going to ensure growth between that first and second score. I'm going to pause right there and see if there are any questions up until this point. Also, I just needed a drink. All right, let's move on to do's and don'ts then. This might come off as harsh, and I hope that it doesn't, but it is naive to think that what worked for one person who got a 522 is going to do the exact same thing for you. Every single person that takes this test is different than the next, right? And so I don't want to see you dive right into somebody else's plan, because it's not your plan. It's a don't to say, I'm just going to take these Kaplan books I found on the side of the road, or, that somebody left at the library, or that my neighbor who took the test 5 years ago gave to me, and just start, right? You've got to take the time to figure out what works for you. I'd also say that you shouldn't plan to study for longer than a year. What research shows us is that students really start to burn out after about that 6-month mark, and kind of lose motivation and steam. And that's the last thing that you want to happen when you've got 3 or 2 months left before your test date, right? So taking the time to kind of step back and look at the big picture and do some backdating from the date that you're anticipating testing is a really good idea. So question in the chat. So taking biochem and studying for the MCAT is feasible. Yes, I have students do it and score well. Yep. And I think I have this somewhere later on, but I will say in response to that question, the way that you do that is you don't build in specific time for biochem. You use the time that you're in class and the biochem resource, whatever you decide on. Maybe it's a Kaplan book, maybe it's a Princeton book, maybe it's something else alongside what you're doing in class, right? You can use that professor to ask questions about things that maybe aren't connecting between what they're talking about in class and what you're seeing in this MCAT book. But you wouldn't build out extra time just for biochem, because you're already spending likely 3 hours a week in class and then another 3 hours a week outside of class to make sure that you're prepared. Okay, so diving into the do's, the things that we want you to do. We want you to research your resource options, right? There are a lot of resources out there. They all claim to be the best. Some of them even say, I guarantee you'll get this certain score. I'll talk about why that's not a good thing a little bit later on. Don't believe them. You have got to find the resource that's best for you. I also want you to take some time to assess yourself. What are the obligations that you have as a student, as maybe an employee, as a volunteer, as a family member, as, I don't know, maybe you're a groomsman or a bridesmaid or standing up in someone's wedding. What do you have that you have committed to at the same time that you're planning on studying for this exam? You should not have to stop your life to study for the MCAT. In fact, medical schools want to see that you are able to balance multiple priorities, right? So you need to take those obligations, those commitments into account. Something else you're going to want to assess is, what are your strengths and weaknesses in subject matter? I've already mentioned this once, but if you earned AP credit for basic bio, that might be at the start of this period for you a weaker subject area because you took it so long ago. So you've got to identify what are the subject areas that you just didn't connect with as well in class. Those might be the subject areas that you want to build a little bit more time out to study the content in, to review the content. Do you have learning preferences? And by that, I mean, do you like to buy a textbook and hold the textbook? I do. I buy a textbook for all the classes. Was sociology maybe one of your first semester classes, your first year? Is that a class that you're going to have to go back and do some research on? Did you start off as a physics major and then change to something else? So your physics stuff was really early and you got it out of the way and haven't seen or touched it since, right? Do you prefer longer periods of time when you're studying, or do you like to break it up into like 30-minute increments and 10-minute breaks, right? These are all things that are really important that you should think about that are specific to you so that you can make a plan that makes the most sense for you. Do create a personalized plan, which we're going to spend some more time talking about, and be realistic, right? Some students will come into my office and say, I'm going to study for 12 hours a day. No, you're not. You're not when you're taking 15 credits and you do 10 hours a week of research and you're going to, whatever else you're doing. Like, be realistic with yourself about what you can handle. Okay. Moving on. Okay, so personalized plans ensure you will do the things that we know successful students did, right? Success in the MCAT is a combination of things, right? Success comes from content review, which we know most people, that's what they think of when they think of studying, right? Success in the MCAT comes from taking practice tests, right? And you're going to do that practice test taking strategies while you're taking practice tests, and then building up stamina. And that's where I should have said practice exams. I'm sorry. You need to take somewhere between 8 and 10 full-length practice exams to make sure that you can sit for that full 8.5-hour exam, right? On a regular basis. Like, the first day that you're sitting for that length of time shouldn't be the day that you're taking the exam. If you take the time to come up with a personalized plan too, it very well may save you money, right? You only have to take the exam once. You're only buying one set of resources once. A lot of students who retake the exam don't think through how they're going to use all the resources that they've paid for, and then a subscription runs out and they have to re-up that subscription and end up paying more money, right? So if you take a little bit of time at the very beginning to kind of plan out what your preparation is going to look like, it's useful in so many different ways. All right, so what do personalized plans include? Kind of what should we be considering? Where should we start, right? Three things really, and I've touched on these already: obligations outside of studying and resources, and then the length of study period that you have. And these two things, obligations of studying and length of study period, kind of go hand in hand. I'm going to talk about those next, and then I'll flip to all of the resources. Yes, this is recording and we are going to post it on our YouTube channel, as well as I will email it out to anybody that signed in. I know that you're not able to sign in right now, Alexander. I'll try to remember if I can, but you absolutely will be able to find it on our YouTube channel as soon as I'm done editing and uploading. So, okay, so let's move into, you're welcome. Let's move into talking about how obligations outside of class and then the length of time that you are going to study are kind of working together, right? So, so you've got commitments on the top here and free time on the bottom. The period of time that we're going to study depends on how many commitments we have, leading to how much free time we have, right? If we are at a point where our commitments outside of the classroom are low, maybe our research project has kind of wrapped up, we're in a volunteer position where we can move from every week to every other week. We're carrying 15 loads of credits and we tutor once a week, right? We've got relatively low commitments. We might be able to get through studying in 2.5 to 3.5 months because we can spend more hours per day studying because we have more free time, right? On the flip side of things, if you're still relatively committed during the time that you plan on studying, that is 100% okay. No, like I already said this, no one should have to stop life to study for this exam. Right? yes, just do a lot of medical students get dedicated step one study period, but that doesn't mean that they're stopping the other things that they're doing. They're still involved in extracurriculars and research and things like that, because those kinds of things you start all over again in medical school to put on your residency application. So again, you're not stopping everything for this exam, right? So if your commitments are high, maybe you're in the middle of your own research project, or you're in the middle of a big breakthrough in the lab that you're working in. You've got an MA position part-time. Maybe you're the president or vice president of a club. You're not just going to have as much free time. And that results in a longer period of time that you're studying because you just don't have the amount of hours in a given day to dedicate to MCAT. Neither one of these situations is better than the other, right? So when students ask us, how long should I be studying for the MCAT? It really kind of depends on you and what else you've got going on. You've got to make really, really, really good decisions about your time and what's important to you. Sometimes students will be like, well, I've been volunteering at this, Henry Ford Cancer Institute for about a year now, and I really do kind of feel like I've seen everything I can see. Well, sure, maybe that makes sense to phase it out, right? But that doesn't mean that you phase everything out, okay? So you've got to determine what is important to you, what's important for you to continue doing, and then, determine how much free time you have so that you can make some choices about how many hours a day you're going to spend, okay? Looking at an example here. So this is a made-up student. They're entering their third year. They're talking to me in their fall semester, very much like right now. They've got one MCAT course left, and they're going to take it in winter. And they really, really, really want to study for the MCAT in the winter. Told you, totally support that idea. See students do it all the time. Outside of having, a full-time load of classes, they are involved in a UROC research project. They got the funding, so they're just starting it themselves with the hope of going to NCUR at some point. They are also a research assistant in a lab. So they're doing that a couple of hours a week. They work part-time at a private practice. They're also the vice president of a student org, and they volunteer to tutor once a week. They really, really want to take the MCAT before the start of their fourth year. And that might mean sometime in May at the end of their third year. That might mean sometime in June, July, August. Like, we haven't determined that yet, but they want to know about study time. Okay. So my answer to them would be, will any of your commitments slow down or phase out? If they say yes, then I would say, okay, protect that time, use that time to study, and let's target a 3 to 4 month window length with longer periods of time that you're studying during the day, right? We would also check in at certain points during that 3 to 4 month period. And I'd say, how's it going? Have you taken a full length practice exam? Are you seeing improvements in those scores, right? If the student says no, every single one of those things that I said to you is important for me to continue doing, then we're going to plan for a longer study period, right? You're going to spend 2 to 3 hours a day or 1 to 2 hours a day. And we're going to make a plan that allows you to kind of chip away at content review, but also involves lots and lots of practice questions. So you're not losing skill in answering tests or using test taking strategies, right? And then we check in and see how it's going. Maybe, halfway through that longer study period, one of those research projects falls off, or, heaven forbid, the MA job goes away because the clinic isn't doing well, right? So we adjust as time goes on. And I think that's the other important thing. Like, if you say, I'm going to study for 6 months, and at the end of that 6 months, your practice scores are not where you need to be, then we extend that study period, right? So you need to be flexible and realistic in your thinking. Questions about what we've talked about so far before I move on to resources? Feel free to unmute yourself or drop it in the chat. All right, let's talk about resources then. Sorry, I'm going to go back and emphasize one thing about this. There is no right or wrong way. There is no guaranteed way to guarantee a score, right? You've got to pick the length of time and the number of hours a day based on you. I know I've already said it, but we say it a lot. Okay, so let's talk about resources now. So there are 3 predominant types of resources that most students are using as they prepare for this exam. And they're going to use a combination of these, right? I'm dividing them into books, software, and courses. Again, the Pre-Med and Health Science Center does not promote any one of these resources over another, or specific companies over another. We really, really feel like you need to find your fit, right? So that means that you need to do some investigation in the resources, the resources that you have heard about, right? Your friend might say, oh, I used Kaplan books and they were great. Awesome. I'll take a look and see if they'll work for me, right? Oh, I have a set of Princeton Review books I'll give you. Great. You look at them, and if you're not jiving with them, maybe you lend them to someone else, right? So finding your fit, super important. First thing I want to talk about are the AAMC resources. AAMC resources are an absolute must. And this is because the AAMC writes the exam. So their resources are coming from the same entity that is writing the exam that you're going to take. Their resources are going to be the best. They have both print and online resources. They have quite a few free and low cost resources too. I'm going to drop a link in the chat to the MCAT hub, which you would go to and log in, and then you can take a look at what they have for free and what they have for low cost. I think one of the best resources is the bundle that they offer. It's $294. You get 365-day access, so you get a full year access, right? It includes 4 online practice exams. You get a section question bank. You get a diagnostic tool. You get Q banks for all of the sections, so you can do lots of practice questions. So it's kind of all encompassing in terms of like the practice questions that the AAMC provides in one bundle that you're paying for. I'm not sure which resources come with the fee assistance program, so you'd have to look into that if that's something that you're pursuing. But these resources, hands down, are something that you need to get and you need to make sure are incorporated in your study plan. New to the MCAT Hub this year is the What's on the MCAT course outline that I already shared with you. All of the practice exams are going to include explanations for all answer choices as opposed to just the wrong ones. Using answer explanations are a great way to, sorry, my dog's trying to get my attention, are a great way for you to learn content that you might not connect with in some of the books. They also have the option to rate your confidence level on some of the practice stuff so that you can better gauge your understanding and make sure that, again, you're spending your time on things that you feel like are going to be a little more challenging or stressful for you to look at. Oh, Mohammed, you're saying the fee assistance covers the same ones that I'm talking about? Yes, perfect. Thank you. Okay, on to other resources. So books, right? Just because somebody else used a set of books and got a score that you like doesn't mean you will. So don't make assumptions with book sets. Take a look at the books before you invest. If you can get a set for free or low cost, awesome. Even if there are not like the most current edition, you can still use those and be fine. Aesthetics are important, right? The way that a book is set up, if you find it confusing just visually looking at it, you're not going to be motivated to get in that book and use it for what you're buying it or renting it for, right? Chapter setup is important. So you need to know that you can work with the way that the book is set up so that you are motivated to get in there and use it for content review. I would also be looking at, when I'm looking at sets of books, are there additional things that come outside of just the books in the set, right? Sometimes book sets will include full-length practice exams. The more you have, the better. Sometimes it'll have additional Q banks. Sometimes it'll have, Kaplan for a long time had these like quick cards that a lot of students talked about being really nice for referencing when they were doing quick study, or flashcards. So investigate what comes with the set of books when you're looking at cost, because it might not just be a set of books. I did a quick search for what current sets are costing right now. I did it on Amazon. So Kaplan for the 2023-2024 set was running about $175. The Princeton Review, which is 4th edition, was $127. Blueprint didn't have any cost info available, but they definitely talk about having a set of books. I think it's one of those things where you have to reach out and let them know you're interested, and then someone really salesy contacts you, which for me is a little bit of a turnoff, but Blueprint is a popular choice among students. I talk to students all the time that use it and really like it. And then the Berkeley Review is a set that isn't as common, but I've definitely heard good things about it. It's a little more pricey at $375. So do your research. Again, used sets of books are awesome. Sometimes we'll have students donate used sets of books to us, and when that happens, we do like contests, giveaways. So pay attention to the newsletter. We just gave away a set of books last semester, so And when you're done, if you want to donate your books to us, we're happy to do it and raffle it off to someone who might need them. Okay, so that's books. Software. Do your research, like my guy there. I spent a lot of time on that slide, not too much, but just a little bit. Again, don't just buy something that someone else did because they were successful at it, right? You will want to decide how you plan on actually, let me give you examples of software. So when I refer to software, I'm talking about things like UWorld. Jack Weston has like a CARS question of the day. Khan Academy has a partnership with the AAMC right now, and it's free, and there are a lot of MCAT prep resources on there. Other software type of resources that students talk about using are Anki, Magoosh. MCAT Bros talks about developing a schedule for you and then providing you with questions. And I'll come back to those later. Decide how you're going to use these. Are the resources going to be your primary source of content review and strategy review, or are you using these resources to supplement the books that you're using, or maybe a course that you're using, right? That may have an impact on how much money you're willing to invest in a resource, right? If you're not going to use it as your primary source of content review, maybe you don't get a year subscription. Maybe you only get a 6-month, right? You want to make sure that there's time that you are going, the time within your study plan, right? The length of time that you're going to study, that you can fit this resource in. I hear about a lot of students who buy too much, and then their test date comes up and they take the test and they don't use something, right? So be strategic about, what you're using and how you're going to use it. UWorld, for example, is designed to be a standalone tool, right? They've designed it so that the interface of UWorld looks very much like the interface of the MCAT when you sit down to take it. And when you take these practice questions, the answer explanations are done in so much depth and linked out to other resources that you use the answer explanations for content review. It works for some, it doesn't for others. So some use it as a primary, some use it as a supplemental resource. You've got to figure out what's going to be best for you. If you know someone that has the software subscription, ask them if you can poke around in it for a little bit. Let's see. The other thing that I want to mention about Anki, because students like to use it, is it's a nice resource. And yes, it's absolutely used by students in medical school for their studying. I think that there is risk in using pre-made Anki decks, right? If you find a whole bunch of them, yes, the information is there, but you are literally memorizing. You're not processing. You're not practicing applying, right? And part of creating your own decks is you thinking through a different way to explain something, connecting concepts that you might not have connected. So if you're going to use Anki, I would encourage you to do it so that you're creating your own deck that you're using and going through. Using somebody else's work it's not going to resonate as strongly with you if you don't do it. I don't know much about Magoosh. I've heard a couple of students reference it. I did a quick Google search for it and it definitely pops up. But I don't know much about it. MCAT Bros, same thing. I've had a couple of students use it. You got to pick your poison, however you want to do it. So I would say that UWorld, Jack Weston, and Khan Academy are some of the most popular that we talk to students about, or that students come to us with. Okay, courses. So let's talk about those. So there are lots of different types of courses. Self-paced, live online, which is basically like a synchronous course. And then live in person, although I feel like the live in person offerings are dwindling, I'll be honest with you, right? If you're going to use a course, and students will ask us, should I use a course? My response always is, that depends on you and your learning preferences and what you need as a learner. Are you a learner that needs some accountability, right? I'm going to compare this to the old me. I used to have a gym membership because I wouldn't work out otherwise. I needed to pay for that membership so that I was holding myself accountable for using that money, and I would go to the gym, right? Are you a learner that needs accountability? Does paying for a course help you to stay on track and scheduled in a study plan, right? That's what a lot of students do when they take a course, right? They know they've invested this money in it, so it's a motivator in itself to utilize whatever the course is that it provides. As you decide that you want a course, as you're making choices about what's best for you, please consider your learning preference If async courses work well for you through Wayne State or another school that you've taken them through, then the self-paced course may work well for you. You know, you've got a lot of discipline. You outline each day what you're going to do, right? If you need more accountability of meeting with someone on a daily or weekly basis, the live online or the live in person might be a better fit for you. What else comes with it? A lot of these courses are pretty expensive. So in addition to the instruction or the resources, you know, if it's self-paced, you know, what are the resources you're getting in addition to content? How are those resources being conveyed for you? Maybe you're someone who likes electronic books only. Courses might make more sense for you because all of the content is stored within some kind of learning management system. What is the length of time of the course and what's your projected test date? A lot of students assume that they should be able to walk into the exam the day after, the week after a course has ended and shoot it out of the water with a score, right? And that doesn't happen. You need time after a course finishes to be able to practice what you've learned in that course. You need time to continue to strengthen content subject areas because courses don't go in depth into all of the content areas. You still have to do a lot of that on your own. So if you're planning on a 3-month course and you're planning on an April 1st test date, you can't start that course in, you know, January and expect to go right into the April date and do really, really well. You probably should take that course in the fall and then have a couple of weeks or months leading up to the test date that's going to allow you to practice what the course provided you. Don't let a guarantee fool you. It's not always a good thing. If you pick a company with a guarantee and you don't get the score guaranteed, why would you want to use the same methods to retake the exam, to study for the exam again, right? That guarantee shouldn't be the sole reason or the reason that you invest in a course. Do the research to figure out what you like about the course, what the course offers, if it matches your learning preferences before you rely on that guarantee. Extra time might be nice, right? With practice questions or Q banks maybe that you didn't use. But if you were using their study methods and they didn't work, that doesn't mean that they're automatically or, you know, magically going to work the next time around. Popular choices. So Kaplan's popular, Princeton Review's popular, Blueprint is popular, Altois is popular. Those are the ones that we hear from the most as an advising office, the companies that are asking us to share their resources with students. If someone else has used another course, I definitely love to hear about it. Thank you, Mohammed. So yeah, all right, I'm gonna go to this next screen. I gotta jump over to the chat because there's a few things. So first, where can I sign for the newsletter you've mentioned? To get the newsletter, you have to come to a pre-med essentials session. So if you haven't been to a pre-med essentials session, you won't get the newsletter. That's the only way to get added to our listserv. Mohammed checked and Blueprint is selling their books only this time around with the tutoring package. Thank you, Mohammed. That is good information to know. So those are not available as a standalone resource. Thank you. Are there other courses, softwares, or books that you are using? Because sometimes you guys as the students are out there talking to others at other schools and something makes its way to you before it does to us. So is there something that you found that's really great that we should be aware of as an office in terms of investigating? So I'm going to open that up really quickly. Anybody feel free to unmute or drop it in the chat. Tucker, stop. No? Okay. Okay, so, you know, we've spent all this time putting together a study plan. You're engaging in this study plan. How do you know when you're ready? Thank you. Student organization help with MCAT prep. Julia, are you saying that certain student orgs are doing like MCAT prep classes?
Yeah, I'm saying that's a other resource that I'm sharing.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Like, for instance, I have a student organization and we do MCAT prep, such as like study nights and game nights.
So your organization hosts nights. What kind of are you guys using, like Kaplan books or anything like that? Are you partnering with certain companies?
We have the note card. We bought a note card pack. I'm not sure what brand it's from because it was someone else's, but
yeah,
we have a flashcard pack and we also will do like Kahoots.
Okay, yeah, that's great. And that's nice. I love that student orgs are doing that. Julie, if your student org ever hosts one and you want us to share it, email me and I'll get it in our newsletter.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I talked about UWorld a little bit. UWorld is newer on the market, but it seems to be a pretty popular resource. It actually started out as a company that was doing test prep for step 1 exam. And it was so students were having such success with the way that it was getting them ready for that exam that the company kind of, added on to their services with MCAT prep. So a lot of students find it popular, or it's popular with a lot of students. Okay, so jumping to how do I know when I'm ready? The only way that you're really going to know that you're ready is by taking, again, lots and lots of practice tests, right? We talk about somewhere between 8 to 10 minimally. You should be scoring consistently where you want or higher than where you want before you sit for this exam. As you're kind of building these practice exams, and again, they should be happening in this, like the latter half of your study period, right? You want to take a diagnostic, you absolutely can, so you can see some growth, right? But you should be planning these full practice exams and then a day to go over them right after the next day in the latter half of your study period. And you should be able to see some consistent growth if you're taking those results and analyzing what content areas you're having, struggles with, or you're finding challenging. And if there are specific strategies that aren't working for you. Okay. Don't rely on the idea that you'll magically get a higher score on test day. This year, especially, I cannot tell you the number of students that have come to me who were hovering like just below their ideal score, and we're really relying on that motivation to kind of push them over the edge and get that score, and it didn't happen. So you need to feel solid when you go in, and feeling solid means that you've scored 3 and 4 times in a full-length practice exam and getting the scores that you want. Let's see. Going back to the chat real quick. So there's exam crackers, mixed reviews. If you have any information on that. Yeah, I hear mixed reviews about exam crackers too, Aya, which is why I didn't include it on the list. I don't hear a lot of students talking about exam crackers. The ones that I listed, the Kaplan, the Princeton, the Blueprint, and the Altuis are used far more commonly than exam crackers. Evan asks, when should we be taking the diagnostic before starting heavy review? Yes, that's when I would do that. I would give yourself kind of like a baseline, right? Take a diagnostic towards the beginning of if not the first day of your study period, to see where you're at. And that may help you kind of determine, do you need to do a deeper dive in bio than you do in orgo, or physics is really rough for you. You need to spend more time on physics, right? So using that diagnostic along with your own self-assessment will be helpful to you in determining like kind of the structure of the hours that you're going to spend on a daily basis. Okay. Bottom line, there's no proven best way to study, right? And I've touched on this so many times. I feel like I can't say it enough, right? Students come into our offices all the time. Well, my brother's in med school and he got a 522 and this is what he did. You're not your brother, okay? You've got to figure out what works for you. This is also a hard exam. It is meant to be hard. It is meant to test your stamina. There's no easy way to study for it, right? Students come in, they're like, well, I want to know what the easiest way to study is. It's not. There is no easy way. You've got to be ready for that. So sometimes that's why students take a gap year. They have been working so hard in all of their science and non-science classes that they just need a break to get rejuvenated in order to ramp up to study for this test again. A lot of students kind of have that fatigue and burnout because they've been going so long. And then this major exam is tacked on the end of a lot of those hard science classes. So there's no easy way to study. Be kind to yourself when you're thinking about when the best time to study for you is. Your goal is to get the best score that you can the first time that you take it, right? You should never go into a planning period like, well, I'm going to do this, but I'm also going to have this extra backup plan in case I have to take it again, right? You're already starting off not in a confident way. So come up with a plan that considers your commitments, allows you time to evaluate yourself as a learner and take into consideration your learning preferences. Do your research on those resources and make sure that you're using the ones that resonate best with you, and be flexible with your timeline. sometimes the students will have this beautiful timeline. They've created this beautiful schedule. They've brought it into me. It's even color coded because they know I like it. The color coded schedule. And then a grandparent dies, or, they get COVID, or they get really sick, right? You've got to be flexible with your time period, and your timeline. If that happens, then you might have to push back. And I am telling you right now, medical schools would rather see you make a really solid decision like that than flub through and stick to your timeline, score really poorly, and then be flustered and try and test again, right? They want to know that you are a good decision maker, that you learn from situations that happen, learn from failures and mistakes, okay? So they're not in any kind of, there's no timeline binding you to, or there's nothing binding you to the timeline that you initially set for yourself. Okay, I have two different surveys that I want to ask you. One of which is because the Princeton Review is offering to do some free events for us. And I want to at least get your opinion about when the best time to do those events are. Actually, I'm going to stop recording real quick.